we're going to take a brief pause from all the politics. It's primary day here in Wyoming, but, well, there might be a little bit of politics here. Jonathan, we are up to our eyeballs in primary right now. A lot of important races. Jonathan Gould is with us. He's the 32nd Comptroller of the Currency. I got one of those in my household. It's called the wife. But yeah, this guy oversees bigger money. The federal agency responsible for chartering, regulating, supervising national banks. Basically like a large bank watchdog. There's so much to it. The OCC, established in 1863 by one of our finest presidents, President Lincoln. Yeah, great to have you on. Great to have you in state. Are you in Wyoming right now? And I got to think you're here as part of, and I know you have a separate conference, but of course we have all the Kansas, we have the whole Fed banking, the symposium in Jackson Hole at the end of the month.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and that's why I'm out here. Although, who needs an excuse to come out to Wyoming? I had the pleasure of being out in your great state a few months ago at the University of Wyoming and at your capital too. Again, to hear about all the great things that are going on in Wyoming and all the innovation that you're leading on the digital asset and blockchain space. So that's why I'm out here again in the context of a blockchain symposium here in Jackson.
Yeah, that blockchain symposium, the SALT blockchain symposium, the Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium takes place August 27, 28, 29. Of course, we're all here for the fly fishing, but we might do a little bit of, banking talking. The theme this year for that economic symposium really dovetails nicely with what we're going to talk about: financial innovation, implications for payments and policy. And this is a new age, and Wyoming's leading the way in this blockchain, digital assets, all this stuff, including our stable token. I mean, there's so much we got to cover. Before we get into digital currency and the future, let's talk about the past and where we are right now and the importance of what you do. 2008 banking crisis made America hesitant about risk-taking, diversifying money. Like, how important is it for the U.S. to lead the way when it comes to currency? Our dollar is trusted around the globe, and that's important.
Well, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said, U.S. dollar dominance is critically important. Part of what we're doing, part of what Congress did at the leadership and the behest of President Trump was pass the Genius Act about a year ago, a little over a year ago now, actually. And there's a lot of focus across the executive branch in implementing that Genius Act. Just yesterday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, again, the Treasury Department issued a proposed rule implementing the Genius Act. Tomorrow, there's actually a summit at the White House around digital asset and blockchain innovation. A lot of this is really about onshoring innovation, making sure the U.S. continues to be the crypto capital world. And again, we at the federal level, I think, can learn a lot from the great work that the state of Wyoming has been doing over a decade plus in this space.
Nice. Let's talk about that Genius Act. Explain a little more what this is. I think this is a 90 degree. I get my degrees messed up. This is an about face from the Biden administration's approach to crypto and all that stuff. What is the Genius Act? It's been embraced by the Trump administration for sure.
Well, the Genius Act creates a statutory framework for the first time for payment stablecoins, which are a very important innovation based on blockchain technology that has already shown a lot of promise. And I think, again, now with the statutory framework in place and the regulatory framework that we and other regulators in Washington are responsible for issuing over the coming months, that will provide a lot of certainty for companies in America, including in the great state of Wyoming, to build and continue to build the necessary infrastructure to expedite payments, to kind of modernize and bring into the 21st century our somewhat creaking payment system, and also to ensure that cross-border payments flow continues to build on and reinforce U.S. dollar dominance. So this is not just a benefit to consumers, but also a matter of, in my mind, both kind of economic security and national security. So reinforcing U.S. dollar dominance by having a statutory framework in place for payment stablecoins going forward. And our job at the OCC is to implement regulations and build a supervisory framework so that those who are interested in issuing payment stablecoins in the future have a solid foundation in law and regulation and know what's expected of them so they can go forward and bring these innovations to bear to increase speed, lower costs, again, associated with payments.
Jonathan Gould is with us. So, Wyoming's efforts leading the way in this emerging tech, from our frontier stable token to just embracing a blockchain technology. Senator Lummis has been forefront in that. Our governor has been all about it. I've talked to people on the committees, and they explain why it is so crucial, where Wyoming is. Now, I know you are in our great state now, so don't just blow sunshine up our skirt or whatever. But are you really looking at Wyoming as saying, hey, these guys got it right? They're on it. They're ahead of the curve.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. As I was saying at the outset, I was here a few months ago, and Senator Lummis, Governor Gordon had the opportunity to meet with them and hear from a number of the great companies that have chosen to locate in Wyoming on what they've been doing, not just in the private sector, but the public sector level too. And one of the takeaways from when I was meeting with some of those Wyoming leaders was that this has required, for Wyoming to be a leader, has required a concerted effort over a decade plus in commitment to innovation. And that is what we are trying to replicate at the federal level under President Trump's leadership and Secretary Bessent's leadership, and with Congress now on board with this statutory framework that we've now created. And our job, again, as federal agencies, to execute on that, make it happen. And so we've even had some interaction too with your state banking commissioner, just understanding how you have supervised at the Wyoming level some of these activities on the digital asset front, so that we can learn from you, from other states, so that we have the benefit of all this learning that's going on over the last decade, where, as you know, the prior administration had kind of taken what I would describe as a bit of an ostrich approach, put their head in the sand and denied that these innovations were out there and that they might actually deliver concrete benefits to consumers across the country, not just in Wyoming. But that highlights the importance of having state-level innovation occurring. You can't just solely depend upon the federal level. Yes, it's good that the feds are now learning from what we've seen in Wyoming, but you've got to have state-level innovators too.
The stability of crypto, of a frontier stable token has been explained to me. That's important. Blockchain security. I mean, this is as impenetrable to hacker or whatever as things can get. I want to swing back around to the blockchain symposium, where it is, when it is, and talk about that again. But just to switch gears, are we seeing sort of Main Street come back? Wall Street's been dominant. It's a return to Main Street. President Trump has noted it as well. Smaller community banks who know their customers better than anyone. Are we seeing a resurgence here? What does that feel like?
So I think we absolutely are. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has talked about parallel prosperity. He's talked about Wall Street's had a great run of it for the last 18 or so years and beyond, but it's Main Street's turn. Why is that so important? I think it's so important, and we're lucky in that we have a president and a Treasury Secretary who really understand the importance of community banking in America, is that community banks, although they may be small in asset size, they do the lion's share of small business lending in this country, ag lending, commercial real estate lending. So they are hugely important in local communities across this country, and they punch in well above their kind of nominal asset weight. And what's happened since 2010 is we have seen a crisis, if you will, in the community banking world, where half of the community banks that existed back in 2010 have ceased to exist. Now, there are a lot of reasons for why that's happened, but one of the primary reasons was a one-size-fits-all approach to supervision and regulation. A lot of people talk about Dodd-Frank supposedly ending too big to fail. The Treasury Secretary has noted it didn't do that. What it did do was create too small to succeed and put a lot of pressure on community banks and the community bank business model to survive in this country. And so what we have been doing, both at the OCC, the agency I lead, as well as at other federal banking agencies across the executive branch, again, under President Trump's leadership, is dialing back a lot of the unnecessary regulation and one-size-fits-all supervision that flowed out of the 2008 financial crisis. And that really de-risks community banks to the point where they actually couldn't do their job. Banks exist to take a certain amount of risk. Making a loan is a risky business, but banks and community banks in particular, to your point, they know their customers. They take informed risks based on their knowledge of, say, the borrower down the street or sitting at the in the church pew next to them. They know what that person's worth. They understand that person's kind of economic aspirations. They're willing to back them. And we need to get community banks and really banks of all sizes back off the sidelines to promote economic growth in this country.
That '08 crash really shook things up. Many banking institutions became overly risk averse, I'm sure. Can you explain why? I think you would believe this. A healthy banking system has to incorporate a certain amount of dynamicness, diversity, and innovation. I don't normally think of those things with banking. I want banking to be, never changing, reliable, solid as a rock. Why do we want dynamic, diverse, and innovation in banking?
Well, as you noted at the outset in introducing me, we're the oldest regulator in this country. We were created during the Civil War era, 1863. So we're 163 years old. So banks have changed a lot over that time. Innovations have been introduced both at the federal level, at the state level. The key, why this matters, is that banks need to remain relevant. They perform a really important role in our economy. They drive economic growth, drive the provision of credit. If they become so risk averse, they can't fulfill their mission. That's a real problem. The economy stagnates. So we need to make sure that banks are recognizing that there are changing market demands, new technologies they can employ, meeting kind of consumers where they are, whether that's over a phone or in a local branch, a local physical branch, whatever it takes. I think it's very important that I create a supervisory and regulatory framework whereby banks have options and how they want to best serve their changing customer preferences and demands so that they remain relevant over time. And that's a lot of what I'm about and what my office is about, is making sure that given our 163-year history, that we are creating a platform whereby banks can continue to do what they need to do to stay relevant to their local communities and drive economic growth and not see their relevance eroded over time because they can't somehow continue to relate to the changing demands and preferences of their own customers and consumers because of constraints placed on them from Washington, D.C.
Jonathan Gould is a comptroller of the currency. When I first heard this, I thought it was fake news. I thought it was too good to be true. $1,000 from the Treasury deposited for all children born under President Trump's second term. What is this all about? Is it for real?
It's for real. These are Trump accounts. This is a transformative thing that was part of the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, passed about a year plus ago. I think actually last July 4th, approximately, of last year. It's transformative in a lot of ways. I mean, number one, it gives every child an equity stake in the most powerful economy that the world has ever seen. It makes them capitalists on day one. It gives them a stake in this great endeavor that is the United States of America, and particularly relevant on our 250th. So that's hugely important. Another element of it that's, I think, transformative too is the financial literacy component. By introducing children at a young age to the power of investment and just the time value of money and how it's going to grow over time, so that by the time when they're 18, potentially, they're looking at significant assets. And of course, employers, philanthropists, they already are stepping up even kind of local companies in Wyoming are adopting the state of Wyoming and contributing to Trump accounts opened in Wyoming for Wyoming residents. So this is a hugely important mechanism to drive financial literacy over time, which I think we've seen is so important, particularly the rise of, what I would describe as kind of socialist and anti-capitalist views of the world that we're seeing kind of propagated on college campuses these days. So we really need an antidote to that type of brainwashing that's occurring. And Trump accounts, I think, again, through the financial literacy angle, are a great mechanism for pushing back against that narrative as well.
Cryptocurrency exchange Kraken officially relocated, headquarters now in Wyoming, in Cheyenne. What are we to make of this, Jonathan?
Look, I think it's a testament, again, to the great work that the state of Wyoming has been doing over the last decade. Again, that concerted long-term effort to attract businesses. Wyoming's a leader in that. We've seen some other states that have also been leaders, whether it's in digital assets or just creating a welcoming business environment. And we're seeing that. We're actually seeing that within the national banking system, where we have certain state banks, chartered in certain states that frankly have more hostile attitude towards economic growth and to business. And we're seeing interest from some of those state charter banks to become federal banks, to become national banks. And, that's one of the great things about America, is that there's optionality. There are 50 states. There are a lot of options you have for where you choose to work and raise a family, and same in the banking system. And so we're seeing that play out. And I think that's a great thing, as long as we're offering that optionality, and states like Wyoming are leading.
Wyoming, the cowboy state, is leading in the crypto digital asset policy, business, stuff like that. And it's not a time to take your foot off the gas. We're going to double down. Blockchain Symposium, SALT Blockchain Symposium. What, when, and where? And give us an idea what you're going to be saying during this symposium.
Well, it started yesterday. It goes for another couple of days here in Jackson, Wyoming. It's really an opportunity for me to hear from a lot of great industry leaders. The OCC, as we mentioned, is focused on finalizing rules around the Genius Act and creating that regulatory framework for payment stablecoins. So looking forward to kind of hearing some of the innovations that are going on, again, among some of the industry leaders who are gathered here in Jackson, Wyoming, to talk about these issues. And for me to kind of describe where we are in the process and kind of what we're focused on next.
Well, Jonathan, make sure you make time to get on a drift boat on the Snake River while you're here.
I've been on one in the past, so thank you very much, but I'll do my best to do it this time as well.
Awesome. Great to have you on. Thank you for taking time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.